Thank you for tuning in to Hacks and Hobbies with your host, Junaid. In Season 2 of Hacks and Hobbies, we're visited by our amazing guests coming from all walks of life who want to learn their story, their struggles, and their journey on how they got to where they are today. So stick around. In this episode, I get to speak with my good friend and my good brother and brother-in-law, Omar Moinuddin. He's a software engineer, but he's also much more than that. He is a much more creatively connected to his artwork than I am. I mean, the first time I saw him drawing Batman, it's like, what? You can do that? Like, yeah. And then I realized that, a lot of engineers are much more creative than you would imagine, because writing code is a creative process. You can get to the same point, but many different ways. Like, no two coders will write the same code. And so he's been doing lots of cool things recently, and I'm just like, we need to bring you on and talk with our audience, because we talk a lot about hacks and hobbies and life journeys, and what better way to do that than on a podcast. So Omar, thanks so much for joining again.
Yeah, thank you so much for that really nice introduction there, Junaid, and really nice to be talking to you again.
Of course.
So yeah, where do you want to get started?
So I know you've been doing a lot of different things, including being a parent to two kids and raising them and taking the load as a parent. And we've had a lot of parents come on the show and talk about, what it is to be a good person, what it is to be a gentleman, what lessons we want to teach our kids. So go through that route, and then we can go into some of the hobbies that you've taken and accomplishments last year. What it took for you to get in shape and make those Spartan races happen.
Yeah. So being a parent, man, it's definitely been a journey. I think almost everyone, when we reflect on it now, you always think about the fact that it's never quite what you expect it to be. You always go in with a lot of expectations about what it's going to be like to be a mom, a mom or dad, and what it's going to be like to have kids. And then it really happens, and you're like, okay, this is nothing what I thought it was going to be like. It ends up being usually a lot more stressful, a lot more involved, and at the same time, it's full of wonderful moments and the things that you would. You just have to experience it, right? It's like the Matrix. You have to go through the whole process to
Mm-hmm.
appreciate all the good and the bad. And I think the hard part to me these days is that my wife and I, we both are fully employed people, and on top of that we have two girls
Mm-hmm.
that we are trying to raise, and it becomes a really tough balancing act to fit in your work schedule, fit in your time that you have to spend with the kids, and then also try to carve out something for yourself, to kind of keep yourself sane. Because I think that you're just only doing work, and that you're just on this route to get burned out.
Mm-hmm. They call it the rat race, right? You're just racing back and forth, hoping something new will emerge, and you just have to pull yourself out of it and do what's good for me, right? What's good for Omar? What's good for Sadia? What's good for me? In the sense that I'm spending so much time and energy looking out for the well-being for my kids, but what about the well-being for me? Who's gonna look out for that?
Yeah, and we're living in this world now where there's so many things, vying for our attention, right? I mean, it's like there's no shortage of something wanting to take you away from focusing on yourself. Whether it's just wasting time, in my opinion, sometimes wasting time watching too much TV, or
Oh
just
my God, yeah.
surfing too much internet, or
Hmm.
spending a lot of time on Reddit or YouTube or whatever. And then
Yeah.
on top of that, you're managing all this other thing. It's like, okay, you barely have any time to ask that question. Okay, hey, what is it that I really want to do here? What is
Mhm.
it that I want to spend this very precious time that I have on? Because everything else is just constantly struggling to take that away from you.
Yes. And that's a big struggle because no matter what it is, right? Everything requires time. Watching television, watching TV, sorry, watching television, watching movies, scrolling through the different social media apps that we have. If they're not providing us with a way to expand ourselves, then it's a time waster. Unless you're connecting with people, connecting with brand new people, and making a difference in their lives, and they're making a difference in our lives, then it's worthwhile going that route. But then just scrolling through content, scrolling through websites, it's great. I mean, it's a sure, we do need that every once in a while because we just don't want to think anymore. We don't want to take that burden of just you just want to shut your brain down, relax, watch a funny movie, laugh your head off, or go to a comedy show, or go to the movies, and you're just turning that off. But then you also need a productive outlet that is giving you, like, you're growing. Your life is not stagnant anymore. You're growing mentally, you're growing physically. And they say, if you're not exercising, your body is deteriorating.
Sure,
And
sure.
the recommended exercise that they say, 30 minutes 3 times a week, is just to maintain what you have, because maintenance requires, and it's not even, like, for example, if you wanted to train for something that you're not normally doing, and that's the next topic, right? Like, you have to train for your Spartan race, right? So how did that, like?
Yeah, so one of the things, just kind of to tie in the thing with the kids, we between the wife and I, we were really having, a hard time trying to find time for ourselves. And especially when you don't have a specific focus to really drive you to want to do it, it's
Yeah.
hard to just carve out time to go exercise, and just I'm just want to gonna exercise, but just exercise for the sake of exercising.
Mhm.
Unless you're, Arnold, and that's just all that you focus on. Even if you, I think even he had a goal, right? He wanted to become a bodybuilding
Mhm.
champion and so forth. And so I think this is where one thing that started to happen. This is kind of something for anyone who's thinking about having kids or has kids, young kids already, is that things do get better. And that's one thing we realized, that hey, as the kids started to get older, they
Mhm.
do your time does start to free up. And that's really what gave us an opportunity to say, okay, look, we really want to get in shape, but just working out is not giving us enough motivation. And my wife at the time, I think I've always talked about it, that I wanted to do participate in one of these obstacle course racing type of events, because they look like
Mhm.
fun. They have, you get dirty, you get a chance to kind of be a kid again. You're jumping
Oh,
over
yeah.
obstacles and walls and climbing ropes and stuff. So
Yeah.
she and I've always talked about it, but I never took the initiative to just say, okay, let's commit and do it.
Mhm.
But I was lucky, she ended up just finding something on Groupon, and we ended up, signing up for one of these events. And then knowing that this event was coming up and kind
Yeah.
of reading about what we needed to do, that helped to really spark that fire to say, okay, we got to start dedicating some time to really try to train for this thing. And then that helped us to find some other people that were doing the same thing,
Yeah.
and we got with this group that met a certain times, during the week to train up. And again, this kind of leads to, you surround yourself with other people with common goals. That just helps you so much more to kind of push yourself to commit to something, because they kind of hold you responsible a little bit. People will call you
Absolutely.
out when you
Mhm.
don't show up.
It's called social accountability.
Right.
And something that I've involved myself into, right? So starting a podcast was very interesting. And initially, I was just self motivated because I was enjoying the beekeeping process and talking about them. And then I joined the Anchor community, which is all of the podcasters. And now you're listening to other people's struggles, what they're doing to do their podcast, and then it kind of motivates you. And then the 30 days of videos challenge, that was also, a concerted effort where there's 30 people in this LinkedIn messaging group, and they're all, pushing each other and cheering each other on. You got your first video, now you got your second video, and then you get that feedback, and then that feedback loop just helps you build more content and build more confidence into moving forward.
Yeah, and without it, it's so easy to be like, I'm too tired. I don't want to do this thing today, and then just give into it. But here you have these people, you don't want to let them down. And I think
Yeah.
that's a huge force that helps us to stay motivated and keep on track. And, and so yeah, that's kind of how we got into the Spartan racing, and then it kind of spawned from there as far as, oh well, if we did one, let's try to do in the Spartan racing community.
Mhm.
The idea is that if you can complete 3 events during the year,
Mhm.
it's kind of considered a very cool thing, and they call it the Spartan trifecta, where you do the shortest race, which is called the sprint, and then kind of a medium race, which is the super, and then the beast, which is the hardest one. If you can do all the 3 in a year, they give you a special medal and a little bit more recognition. And so again, it's that, oh, we did 2 of them. The beast is really hard. It's one of those events that I really did not want to do.
Yeah.
But the fact that we had done 2 of them already, and a lot of people within our group were doing it, it kind of pushed us forward and made us, commit and do it. And at the end of the day, after doing it, you're happier for it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Because now you've accomplished something. You've, gone through that journey, and now you can say, yeah, I did that. But then you keep on going, and you're like, next year I'm going to do 4 races or whatever.
right.
And with cycling, when I started back in 2017 or 2016, I was part of the group. I'm still am, and they had a Slack group, and then constantly talking about constantly talking about biking gear,
Yeah, this is
biking,
Team Velocipede, right?
team velocipede, exactly. And then I was able to dedicate the time and actually go out and bike, and they would have weekly meetups. We're going biking this morning, and I would go out and do the biking. So I was able to do that in 2017, and then 2018 I was really gung ho. I was like, I'm going to continue doing this. But then when you have a third child, it's like, all right, I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, I think it's then you're kind of back to square one, where okay, the kids take up a lot of time, and you really got to just focus on that one thing
Yeah,
that you really want to spend that free time on, and
yeah,
then hopefully once the kid gets a little older, you'll
yeah,
recover a little bit more time, and then you can kind of go back to focusing on the cycling plus the podcast and everything else that you do.
exactly. So Um, actually, what's funny is that one of those. So last year, I did manage to get out on the bike a couple of times, and I think 2 of the times I recorded myself while riding the bike, so became the podcast on the bike episode. And
Right.
what's funny is that I mean, I was looking at the analytics. You gotta look at, okay, which content is getting more views, because people will go and look, hey, let's look at this, listen to this podcast. It sounds pretty funny. And I noticed like some of the ones with like low numbers and interesting comment, like cycling, got some a lot of hits. I was like, wow, people are interested in listening about cycling. So maybe there could be a podcast all about cycling. And my brother-in-law is huge into mountain biking and single gear biking. I was like,
Sure.
you started he started a blog post, a blog to talk about, cycling. It's like, why don't you do a podcast instead?
Yeah, or maybe just you guys can do a couple of episodes focusing
Yeah,
on the equipment and all the
yeah,
stuff that's involved in the biking world, because that's the part that, to be
that's not a
honest,
bad
just
idea.
I'm interested in, and also it's something that I have a big fear of, in the sense that there's just so much to it,
No,
and
you're
sometimes you
absolutely right.
just want a little consolidated look at it,
Yeah, yeah,
and the fact that you've kind of went through that journey of, going, okay, I want to get into this cycling business. Okay, here's all the stuff that you kind of had to acquire to really do it
yeah.
at a certain level.
No, that's a really good point. That could make a good post, because our good friend Adil Khan, he was going into the same process when he wanted to buy cycling. He's like, I want to get into cycling. I need to buy a bike. And then around the same time, Performance Bicycle, they filed bankruptcy, and they're like, oh, we're selling these bikes, and these are the only ones that we have in stock. And I gave him some advice and via text.
Okay, so these are like high-end bikes that they were trying to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
off
yeah.
the
And
market.
then some of them are, just basic bikes. And he's like, I don't have a huge budget. I just want to spend a low number amount. I'm not looking to spend $2,000 or whatever.
Right.
So then he said, okay, these are the two bikes that they have available. Which one should I pick? And I told him, get the road bike, because you're going to be riding on the road, and it'll be better in the long run. But when you're getting a hybrid bike, then the wheels and the tires are sure good, but then you're only working so much. But with a road bike, you have a more, I think, more sporty feeling, and I think you work a little harder on a road
Mm,
bike. You're positioned more aggressively on the bike.
right. So it's better from a conditioning point of view if that's your goal. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's a good idea, man. Thanks. I'll
Yeah,
jot
make it
it
happen.
down.
That'll be an episode that I'll definitely be listening to. That just to hear some of the inside knowledge of basically buying a bicycle and some of the things people need to consider when they're going to
And
enter the sport.
and I can actually, because I'm part of Team Velocity, I can bring on some of those guys, because some of these guys, they've been biking for many more years than I have, and they
Right.
can absolutely have an insight on it. On this is what you want to look for, and these are the different brands and whatnot. All right, it's a good idea. I mean, even yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so I
So
don't
yeah,
know.
I mean that's basically
Yeah.
how the wife and I got into the Spartan racing stuff,
Hmm.
and the best part I think to me about Spartan, if anybody's wanting to consider doing it,
Yeah.
is that you do have this different types of categories where you can be in a competitive group or you can kind of run it in an open group.
Hmm.
And that means that when you're if you want to run in the competitive group, then they're very strict in terms of the fact that you have to complete all your obstacles, you have
Hmm.
to do them all on your own, and if you miss anything, then you are required to do a certain number of burpees, which is that push up jump thing, and you have
Oh.
to do I think 20 some burpees, and that can be pretty intimidating when someone thinks, oh my
Hmm.
god, I'm gonna have to do all this plus run this 12-mile long race or 5-mile long race or whatever. But on the other hand, on the open group, it's kind of it's much more relaxed and it's an opportunity for people to work together. So you can help, your if you and your like my I always run it with Sadia,
Hmm.
and so me and her will help each other out. In some cases where she needs some help going over the wall, I can help her
Hmm.
with that, or if she needs to help me do something, she'll do that, and then it makes for a really nice opportunity for us to connect too. And
Yeah.
that's another thing that I really like because you're kind of there in the moment. You don't have time for social media. You don't have time for distractions. You're kind of both there
Yeah.
doing this thing together.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have this. It was really weird, but in our normal daily life, we have our conversations are always full of so many interruptions because of the
Hmm.
kids doing something or something
Yeah.
else going on. And it was these doing these types of events created this moment where hey, we were just kind of both there. There was nothing else and it was a
Yeah.
chance to just kind of be together. So I think it was really good in that aspect as well, which was something I totally didn't expect when I was signing up to do it.
Yeah, no, that's you make a really good point about that, because remember when you introduced all of us to snowboarding,
Right, right,
and we had similar experiences, because now, we're just focused on learning, focusing on just staying up and going down the slope. But then we also, social media was not huge, but then spent a lot of time and learning, having that journey, learning together. And if you noticed in the world, or lately, what they've been having is they have these events like paint and wine, drink and paint or something. Come together with your significant other or a friend. You go together and you do painting, or you go together and you're building some, handmade objects. out of wood and raw material. So there's a lot of things like this that are coming up that you can go. You can go to this. I think we saw this. Basically, you go to this commercial kitchen, and they have all of these benches, metal benches, and there's an instructor, and you're basically cooking something together.
Right.
So doing these activities, it's they're not hobbies, but they're activities where you get to spend time. Uh, it's like going to a dinner or going.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to do something together, which is pretty cool. Yeah, for
Nice.
sure. And I think we should definitely try to do more of those things. Even when you come visit, I think we
Yeah,
should carve out some time to just go and do one of these activities, whatever it is.
exactly.
Because again, it's a chance to just get away from these things that are always trying to grab our attention. Like you said, the apps, the social media, the constant the red dot that shows up that compels you to pick up your phone and see what the heck it is, even if it's
Yeah,
nothing of real value, but it just
exactly.
compels you like a drug. You got
Yes.
to go check.
So what's interesting about what you just mentioned, right? When we do visit, we'll have to carve some time out to go do that. But the one thing that absolutely annoys me is I know it's an awesome gesture from people who invite guests over for food. It's so amazing, right? They're taking the time out of their day, they're cooking food and having us come over and eat food. But it's the 2 hours before and after food, right, that you just sit and talk. It
Right.
sometimes it's not something that I want to do. And maybe that's just me. Maybe other people feel the same way, but I think that time could be spent more productively.
Yeah. Or and I guess sometimes what happens is it depends on the group, right? If you have a mixed match of people at a party,
Yeah,
then what happens is you don't have any real meaningful conversation with anyone. You're just
yeah,
doing the hey, how's it going? Where are you up to? What's the weather like? Whatever, and then
exactly.
and that's it. You don't really connect. And the people you really want to have a chance to talk to, you can't because they're also busy just doing this meet and greet type of stuff, and that's kind of how
Exactly.
your whole uh, time just gets spent.
Yeah,
And over the years, I mean, that's one thing I've kind of realized that it's far more important to have really good, meaningful relationship with just a handful of people that matter than knowing 1,000 people,
yeah,
but not really having any kind of a connection with any of them.
exactly.
And I feel like the world we are living in today forces you to be more in the other category, which is, you're in the. I mean, do you remember back in the? I mean, I don't know if that's still the case, but people still are vying for likes and number of connections
Hmm.
they have or
Hmm.
number of friends they have on Facebook,
Yep.
and that it takes precedent almost than saying, "Look, I got 5 friends, but these 5 friends, man, they're
That's all I
really
need.
people. Yeah, that's the people that I have a great bond with. I love spending time with them and talking to them. Versus the 200 that I have no idea who they really are. I just like their pictures when they show up on my feed.
Yeah, so that's a really good point that you're mentioning. So from the marketing perspective and from the perspective of people who have services, people who are offering classes and courses and products and services. So for their perspective, they kind of need that social proof, right? So let's say you like for example, you just marketed to all of my audience here about Spartan race without knowing about it because what we're drawn towards, we want to talk about it. We want to talk to as many people as we can about it, and that's the nature of marketing. Now, over the years, we've been told that marketing is the same as advertising, which is an absolute, that had to be the case because that's the only place people were just advertising. It was a false when they call it false advertising. Well, marketing is not advertising. Marketing is much more than that. It's about connecting to people. It's about creating experience that in turns make them a believer, makes them a follower, makes them somebody who's passionate. Like for example, I market about Apple products all day long, right?
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
so passionate about it. Just like I'll market And I'm not saying I'm marketing. I'm just being very what's that word? I'm like an evangelist about a product.
Sure.
And so the reason why people look, and sure, the majority of the reason people are looking for friends is just to show up, just to be like, oh, I have this many friends. But that mentality is kind of going away to a mentality is how many people can I help be better at what they're doing today
Sure.
based on what I know. So there's a huge, I mean, the entire reason I'm doing this podcast is so I can help people understand about different hobbies, what different struggles people have gone through to become an entrepreneur, to, what struggle did they go through, what action they took to be.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. In fact, I'm recording this on my phone. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. So go ahead, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
The success that they are, and it's all about, okay, how many more people can I reach, and from that more people of the reach, who is really, in tune to listening to what I'm talking about, and
Yeah,
find.
there's definitely
um,
a difference, in terms
yeah.
of like a friend group versus, in the case of someone who's trying to build some kind of a, whether it's whether they're like I said, marketing
Mhm.
a podcast or just
Mhm.
wanting to put out information that's going to be helpful. Obviously, you want to try to connect
Yeah,
and share that with as many people as possible.
exactly.
And that's why, like I mean, obviously, on Facebook and Instagram and so forth, yeah, there's tons of people that are just trying to do that. They want to, like, self-help stuff or exercise and all these kind
Mhm.
of things. You can see that they're really just trying to push a positive message, and the more people that
Absolutely.
that can reach, I think that makes a difference. I think, but the key is, I don't think those people at the same time are trying to find a meaningful relationship with that. You're just kind of putting
Exactly.
information out there, and
Yeah.
you hope that somebody has a better day for it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. So the other thing that Gary Vaynerchuk mentions is, communicate with people or reach out and do, because you can do that right now on LinkedIn. You can see, you can do searches based on your target audience, like, hey, this person might be interested in the product that I'm offering, they might be interested. So people are then putting videos up, and right now Instagram is the hottest thing because of the many ways you can interact with people on there. They have direct messaging, they have ads on there. And one of the reason people are trying to get more and more followers on Instagram is, as soon as you reach a 10K mark on Instagram, you can have links in your stories, or you can have links in your videos that you post.
oh,
But if
that's
you're
interesting.
not.
So you can actually market products and things like that that you're
Exactly.
talking about in your
Yes.
videos and stuff. Okay,
But
cool.
for people who don't have 10,000 followers, they have to pay Instagram a fee and promote or boost their post.
I see.
Yeah. So then you can say, okay, what's the call to action? Do you want them to go to your profile? Do you want them to go to a website? Do you want them to go to, where do you want them to go to? So it's really interesting. It's a, I guess you could call it, I guess you can call it Facebook's way of manipulating people. But that's what it is, right? Facebook wants your money, and the only way they can get get it is through advertisements.
Yeah, I mean, that to me is like, when people complain about ads, when people, watching TV, when people complain about ads, it's kind of
Yeah,
like, somebody's paying for this thing to show up on your screen to watch.
exactly.
Okay, I'd say and if you're not paying anything for it, then that
Yeah.
means someone else is, and they're getting something out of it. And the case for the fact that, hey, we get a place to share our pictures and connect to our friends. This service is not cheap. It's
Yeah.
coming, it has a cost associated with it. And
Absolutely.
the way that majority of these companies make up for that is
Mhm.
by selling your information for ads and so forth. And that's just something that we're buying into, and
Yeah.
it's unfortunately, it's a choice that you are almost forced to make nowadays because
Mhm.
there's only these handful of places to connect socially, whether it's Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter,
Yeah.
uh, and all of them kind of operate on the same model. And but if you want to disconnect from all of that, then well, might as well be a hermit because you're basically out of the loop in everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And then you're depressed because
right. Well, or maybe
nothing
not. Maybe
really matters.
you finally achieve Zen at that point because you're
Yes,
like,
that's true too. Did you hear about these jail cells that are designed so you can like pay somebody and go live in a jail cell where you have no access to internet, you have no access to phone, social media, and you're provided food.
right. Well, I mean,
This is
we are as addicted to these things. Just like we were talking about how that red icon that shows up with a number
Mhm.
next to an app, and it literally compels you as much as LSD would compel you, or
Yeah,
whatever, to go check it and get that hit. Where that ding or that noise that happens and it makes you feel good that you have so many likes and so forth. That is literally an addiction,
it is.
for so many people, and it can become almost, a lot. For most of us, it's something that we are able to manage and control. But just like
Mhm.
there's people that become alcoholics or become drug addicts, it can be something that they just can't. It just starts to take over, distracts them out of just being able to complete normal day-to-day tasks or just be focused at work.
Exactly.
I know people that are like that that just can't focus at work without, like, you were talking to them for 30 seconds and they can't
Mhm.
help but wanting to take out their phone and look at something.
Yes.
And that's where, in society we have to be very careful because there's that group of people that really can get into a lot of trouble, just like people did with the opioid epidemic and so forth.
Mhm.
You just get addicted to these things, and then you really do need to put yourself, just like in a Betty Ford detox center. You
Exactly.
have these jail cells, I guess, where they just take your phone and
Mhm.
make you
Like, here's a jumpsuit, and a blanket. Thanks. You can get your phone at the end of the week.
right.
Like, people wanna be put in these places because they can't control themselves. It's crazy.
Right. Yeah, and
So,
then and that's the scary part. I mean, we are this generation that literally saw some from nothing to everything being connected. And
yeah,
we were in this entire transition. Our kids, on the other hand, they're just born in this world,
they
and
are,
I
yeah.
think they're gonna have a harder time finding ways to disconnect, or maybe not. Maybe they're just more attuned to it. But I think they're gonna have a tough time because they just been this stuff has been ever present since they've been born. They don't know
So
anything else.
so here's the thing about that, right? They have these luxuries of, say, YouTube, right? They want watch anything, they are able to.
Right.
So the advantage they have in that, sure, they didn't see it coming because it was already there when they were brought into it. The one thing that they can take an advantage of this is they have the time to, one, build an audience around what they love. Like, if you've seen YouTube, there are channels where these kids or these people are just opening up toys. They're just like, the YouTube video is all about unboxing a toy, and they have millions of hits because these kids are watching these toys being opened. So what's happening is, these young kids, like, for example, I saw the video of your daughter, and where she was playing with this toy and Play-Doh, and she's like, the way she presented the video and how she's using the toy and the tools to create this beautiful hair of this unicorn. And then at the end of the video, she's like, "Thanks guys for watching. Subscribe to my channel." Like, that's ingrained into them, which means that they could be future YouTubers building their audience, building their own niche environment where they can grow as a influencer or as somebody who's teaching other people how to do things.
Yeah, I mean, that is the one positive spin, is that everyone pretty much becomes, just like, in the past, you had a very select few people in the media that were the producers of content,
Mhm.
and you had a much bigger audience of consumers.
Yeah.
Now we have a much more democratized view of things where pretty much anybody is playing both sides. You can be a producer of your own niche thing,
Hmm.
and you can also be a consumer at the same time. And
Yeah.
it spreads the pie, and you get a lot of different views and a lot of different very specific things that you might only care about. Like, I love watching, here's another plug, I guess, for somebody.
Hmm.
But Linus Tech Tips, right?
Hmm.
I don't know if you've seen his channel, or whatever, but he's basically a guy that does really detailed reviews of technical products and so forth. But he has sort of a niche of the way
Mm.
he does his reviews. But
Yeah.
that just really appeals to me much
Hmm.
more so than just the broad reviews that would happen uh, in in on TV channels or some other thing before, because
Yeah.
they were trying to cover for a much broader audience. But this
Exactly.
guy does something very specific for a technical audience, and
Hmm.
that's the audience that I kind of fit into. So
Yeah.
I love that stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the power of the internet. I mean, I was reading somewhere that every minute, 300 hours of video is uploaded on YouTube. Every minute, right? So just looking at that number, what's the niche market on there, right? Who's building their audience? And I was reading, saw this other video, and there's this guy out of Canada, Peter McKinnon, and he built up his channel from a few hundred subscribers on his YouTube channel to a million within 9 months. And so this one guy, he broke down the entire formula. Okay, how did he do it? What worked? And because you got to test, you got to see what kind of content that you're creating is bringing in the audience. And then you got to have, all these things in place. So as soon as somebody comes to your channel, they know exactly what they're getting versus what they're not going to get. And there's so many algorithms running on YouTube, and they know exactly what video you watch and what video should be played next or recommended next. And based on that, there's so many new stuff popping up. Like, I watch these video trailers for new movies, and I'm recommended a review on the trailer and a review on what's going to happen in the movie, and
Right.
like other things, like, oh, this is leaked information. They're like, oh, this is going to happen. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us have gone into that YouTube black hole where the one
Yes,
video leads to another to another. And yeah, that's that algorithm at work. It just keeps
exactly.
giving you the things that it knows that are going to pique your interest, and it's going to continue to want to make you watch. I mean, it is magic in some ways, but it's also a little scary. Like, okay,
It
YouTube
is.
knows
Yeah.
me pretty well. Knows me better than I know myself sometimes.
Yeah. So, Elon Musk, he had an interview with Joe Rogan on his show, or was it Tim Ferriss? Can't remember. I think,
It was Joe Rogan. I
yeah,
remember
Joe
I watched it.
Rogan. And you've probably seen it, right? And he was like, these are all smart engines. Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, they're learning from our behavior, and the advertising that are played, they know exactly who we are. And Seth Godin, in his book, This is Marketing, he talks about there's no privacy. Like, literally, there is no privacy. You might think there is, but there isn't, because we're constantly giving away information based on what videos we watch, what ads we click on not to show, and links that we follow through. I mean, all of that data is compiled somewhere. They're using that.
Yeah, and that's where, like, I would love to know, just like you get your credit report,
Yeah.
it'd be awesome to get like a report from Google to say, okay, this is the kind of personality profile that we've generated from your from decades of collecting on you, what you search for, or that would be so fascinating to look at, right? Just to
It
see,
would
oh
be.
wow, this is what I'm like. you
Yeah,
know?
that's very true. And you know what? It's very possible. There are services out there that will tell you exactly who you are. And somebody says, "Don't Google your own name." Like, why? Because you'll get links to these services that'll tell you exactly who this person is, who that person is that you're looking for. It's really cool. All right,
Oh
so
yeah, that's pretty scary, man. Those are the places where you find out that, oh, I can find out if I have a criminal record, what my past 6 addresses were.
yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of nuts. So
so that's the information you want to look at, right? And if it's presented nice and beautifully in a in a visualization or a or an infograph,
right.
I'll take that.
That's it. That's the next great idea, Junaid. Custom infographics that get made for you based on your internet personality.
it,
Just
it shows your
bas-
persona, who you are.
right. Just goes web crawls through all that data and comes back with.
Nice. All right, so Omar, you got some questions for all of our guests. Number one, what is one hobby that you wish you got into?
Oh, that's a easy one for me, man. Because I always had a real love for drawing and art,
Mhm.
and especially comic book art. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things where when I was younger, I really was into it. But being a product of the Pakistani Indian community, and having parents with kind of more rigid mindsets about what the expectation is from kids in terms of what they're going to study in school and so forth,
Yes.
it just was never looked at. It was only ever looked at as a hobby and never
Mhm.
something that I should try to pursue. And I that's probably, if I have a regret in life, is that I never tried to do something with it. Like actually put myself out there, create a portfolio, try to see if I can get into the comic book world and so forth, because that would have been truly something I would have loved to have tried. At least knowing that, hey, I tried it, okay, it didn't work out, I didn't make it, whatever. But at least I
Yeah.
know, rather than having this big unknown. And a lot of it was just because my parents were like, drawing. Why would you do? What good is an artist? How are you gonna make any money that way? How are you gonna feed your kids, right? Type of stuff.
You should check
So
out the episode I had with Errol Erdeman. He had very similar. We talked about similar things,
right.
and I have good news for you, my friend. You can still pursue a career in. Well, if it's not a career, but at least see where it would go, right? So I know you know of Dilbert,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Dilbert is a comic for those of you who are
Living
young.
in a black hole and don't know what Dilbert is. Yeah.
Well, the author for Dilbert, he wrote a really cool book, and I'm skipping his name right now, but he what was a book. So he wrote a book called The Joy of Work. Scott Adams is the name of the guy, and he's like, he had a corporate life. Like he worked from manager, clerk position. Then he was just lucky to become a manager, and then he eventually started. He's like, I really want to draw, so he started drawing and started doing these comics, and we know where he is now. Another example is a good friend of mine on LinkedIn. He was doing 30 days of napkin drawings. I think it was so every day he would draw in his notebook. He would just draw whatever came to his mind, and he would just post it on LinkedIn. So every day he had a new post with his painting. So that's one approach you could take into seeing where your hobby could take you. It just comes down to, okay, you just need to take some time out, 30 minutes, whatever, draw something, put it out there, and see what happens.
Yeah, and that's it. And you make a good point in that we live in this world now where you have some kind of an audience. I mean, why do you make a
Mhm.
comic book? Because you want people to read it. Well, this is sort of a way to share what you are good at doing with the rest of the world, and
Yeah.
then see how people like it. I mean, that's kind of, yeah. I mean, it might not it's not maybe doing it at a professional level, but it's at
No,
a level where it could be still very satisfying.
here's another one, dude. So I know of my good friend David Calvert. He had been writing a sci-fi novel, which he wrote for like 6 months and sent it to his. He found an editor to edit it, and that book is now on the iBook store or the iTunes store, and it'll eventually be on Amazon and published. So it was a sci-fi novel that he wanted to do, and right now there's tools available for you to self-publish to Amazon bookstore, Kindle, because just like I'm uploading this podcast to Apple, just like you can create a new product to sell on Amazon and eBay, you could do the same thing for books and ebooks and whatnot. So there could be something that you could start, like let's say you have a small story, you just make a comic book out of it. It doesn't have to be too many pages. It could be like 4 pages. There's your story. You can put it up on Amazon. You can put it up on these platforms that are available, and it's all free. It's all free to publish. And another one is another friend of mine. He traveled with his child to like 8 different countries,
Right.
and he's like, I want to do a children's book. He hired an illustrator, and they just launched their first children's book called Through the Eyes of Om, and they traveled to Singapore. So I was like, wow,
Cool.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Another friend of mine was like, hey, I have this idea for this storybook where this little girl, a hijabi girl, she sees the world with her camera, and she can take a picture and visualize it and decode it. So I was like, well, go to here, fiverr.com, and you can find illustrators to illustrate your story. And she's right now working with an illustrator. She's got something going on, and we're looking forward to checking out what's happening with that book. So there
You
are,
know what I like the idea most is that 30-day challenge. I think I'm
yes,
gonna try to definitely do one of those things, maybe on
yeah,
Instagram or something. Just do something once a day
why not?
and
Yeah,
see if it gets you back in the groove.
exactly. I'll definitely share these links with you, of what people are doing. It's pretty
Sure.
amazing. Okay, what is your favorite movie or TV show? I probably already know this, but for our audience.
Yeah. It's really, really hard to pick one, but
Yeah.
recently we were talking about something, and I think if I was going to say a movie that had the most profound effect on me was probably The Matrix. Because I mean, obviously, I love Star Wars, I love Star Trek, and I love a lot of Back to the Future, a lot of great movies.
Hmm.
But if there was ever a movie that I went inside with very little preconceived notions, because I think at the time I didn't watch a lot of trailers,
Yeah,
and how I felt when I came out of that movie, I think I was a different person. Yeah, just
absolutely.
because of some of the really interesting concepts that movie talked about. This whole idea about our world could be a simulation. We are, at the end of the day, our brains are just connected via
Mhm.
different sensors. That's how we observe the world. What really tells us that are we really not in some container somewhere,
Sure.
you know, in a big tank full of thousands of other people just plugged into one big machine. And I mean, you get that feeling sometimes when you put on a VR headset or one of those things, and you're like, "Wow, we were able to create this stuff that pretty much, it's pretty close to making you feel like you're somewhere else doing something else.
Yeah.
How is it that this whole thing that we're living in isn't an illusion in itself?" So that movie was definitely fantastic. And if anybody out there in this world who hasn't seen it, please go watch it because it's truly a marvelous experience. The sequels, they're great, but
Sequels are great.
they could
Yeah.
be. I mean, they
They
can.
help close the story
It's
out.
not every. Yeah, it helps close the story. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but the first movie, just in its own, is
Yeah,
fantastic. It's brilliant.
absolutely. All right. Who is your favorite superhero?
Favorite superhero has to be Batman.
Yep. Batman it is.
Um, yeah, I mean Batman, just because I think one, he really is super because of his mind. He's
Yes.
basically a genius mind to always outthink and outdo a lot of his arch nemesis, and he also lives by code. Right? He has
Yes.
this. No matter what happens, he always lives by that code, and I always found that very admirable. I mean, Superman, all these other characters are great, but really, Batman is something you can really imagine someone with the drive, the physical ability to possibly achieve.
Yeah.
In this world. Right? That's kind of one thing I always respected about that character.
Awesome. Last question. If you were a board game, what would it be?
Oh man, that's that's a tough one. I'm not a big board game player,
Yeah.
so so let me think. If I could be any board game, I mean, yeah, I guess the cliche answer would be, well, I'd be a chess or something, just because, but maybe, okay, I would say there is one board game that I would pick. I don't know if you know Ludo, right?
I do. Mhm.
Yeah, so I don't know if a lot of people in the U.S. know that game, but
Actually, the game is similar to Trouble.
maybe. So I think the reason I would pick that board game
Mhm.
just because it was one of those games that I played with my grandmother growing up. And I
Uh,
have very fond memories of playing with that because that was one game she loved to play. And anytime you were bored, she'd be like, "Let's play this game,"
yeah.
And she would get so into it and everything else. And I have some fond memories associated with playing with that game, so I think I would pick that one.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can people find you if they wanted to connect with you?
I really don't know. I don't have much of an online presence, but I guess on Instagram you can maybe find me somewhere. But maybe you can put a link.
Yeah, because because the audience will want to follow your 30-day challenge of your
There
drawing.
you go.
Right?
Yeah, so I think we'll have to put a link in there because I don't know. I don't give out my Instagram ID enough that
You can
I don't
create
even
a
know what
new
it is.
one just for this challenge.
There you go. I like that
Yeah.
idea. So
Awesome.
so we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, put it in the show notes. All right, man. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show, and it's really great. I think for a lot of us, Jay, you've been doing this thing, and it's a little inspirational, man, because I think we're all in the same age. We've all kind of been through this thing where we started families, and our time became very limited, slowly, and it's hard to find time to do the things you're really passionate about.
Yeah.
Seeing you do this is kind of inspirational for us all, and I think we're all going to try to adopt some of those same habits
Yeah.
and hobbies that you're doing, and hopefully get more time for ourselves back.
Exactly. I think I should bring more family on.
Yeah, this way you can get to know a lot of your family that you might be like, I haven't talked to you in years.
Yeah.
Let's chat.
Why don't you talk to me on Zoom?
All right, man.
All right. Congratulations, you made it to the end of the episode. Thanks so much for listening to our guest on this episode. Please send me an email at junaid@hacksandhobbies.com to tell me what you loved about our guest today. You could find links mentioned in this episode on the hacksandhobbies.com website.